As a dungeon master, you create a world as best you can, and as you play within its borders more and more, it's only natural that you should come to love it as a second home. After all, you know it. You know its mountains and its oceans. You know the color of its sky. You know the sound that echoes down the city streets of a morning. You work patiently with your friends to make this world and fill it with detail. And as you explore it more and more, it becomes a monument to your endeavors, a story to be told again and again. And eventually you come up with a new idea. So you gather your players and you tell them about this new idea, and they eagerly agree. They come together and they share their notes and their ideas. They help you out with your concepts and even bring in their own tidbits of lore and culture. And when you gather everything together, you've created a small compendium of information, of notes, of lore about this world, something gathered together. And every session after that, after you've finished fighting dragons or delving into goblin lairs, you add a new addition to the pile. A new map of a town, a new blueprint of a dungeon. And slowly, you begin to create your own atlas. Hello adventurers and welcome back to the Red Quills. My name is Ryan and today I'm working on the idea that I'm most excited about, the project that is going to be taking over this whole year, the creation of an atlas of my fantasy world. I'll give you an overview of the concepts that I'm working on, the processes that I'm using to create it, and ideally the tools that you'll need in order to create your own. Because the worlds that we make are more than just settings that we can pick up and put down whenever we like. They are loving works of art. And they deserve to be treated like that. So let's get into it, talk about what I'm doing, why I'm doing it, and how I'm doing it. For those of you who are new to the channel, my biggest project this year is to create an atlas of the setting of the campaign that I'm running for my players, the location of the Kingdom of Endon. Now, yes, the word atlas is generally used to refer to a collection of maps of the world, and in this case, it's only one small corner of a much larger world. But I'll be working on it in the background of my processes over the course of the year. The updates are going to be available for free on the Red Quills Patreon, which you can check out in the link below. And the processes that I'm learning to use, the concepts that I'm putting into place, the ideas that I'm adding to the map are definitely going to help me in creating the other videos that I make for this channel, the other maps and charts and world building lore tidbits that I use to flesh out my world and that you can use to flesh out your worlds too. Over the years, I've created any number of maps for my world, and what I want to do is just pull them in, compile them into one big pile. So if you have a pile of your own disparate maps, if you want to work on a project that brings all of your notes together into one resource, then that's the same thing I want to do. So let's do it together. Now, I've been creating the world of the Kingdom of Endon, the setting for my players' campaign, for over 5 years now, and I have, with no word of a lie, hundreds of maps and charts and blueprints, and even more than that, of world building notes and lore tidbits. My campaign is over 100 sessions in, and it's still going strong. The players are still really enjoying it. So I'm going to pull all that together and make a reference book that I can not only refer to myself, but that I can introduce in world to give them clues about where they want to go. But first, let's talk about atlases as a whole. I have a lot of opinions about maps, which isn't a surprise to anyone, really, who's on this channel. Over the years, I've done any number of different styles and different inclinations of map, whether they're for my use or for my players' use, and you can check them all out on the channel as we go through. But generally speaking, when I create a map, it's not just for my use. It's first and foremost a world building tool as I create it. It helps me to understand the world better, think through all the little questions, the niggling details that really help you to flesh out a setting into something that's not only believable, but immersive. And then once I've created the map, generally my idea is to give it to the players or to their characters, which means that it needs to fit into the world building that I've so painstakingly added into the creative process. And that gives us a problem, because it was only very recently that maps were even halfway accurate. And if I create a map of the world and it's 100% accurate, then that leaves us with an immersion problem. The societies that are common in fantasy worlds are roughly medieval or Renaissance, And it's only in the late Renaissance that you even begin to come across something like a decently accurate world map. Maps up until that point were often more about theology and philosophy than they were about actual navigation. And they certainly weren't something that you could use to chart a course across the world. So when I give this to my players, I'm often worried about the anachronisms, the inconsistencies, the holes in the world building that implies, and the usefulness of a map in general. We take them very much for granted in the modern day, but being lost was an ongoing problem for practically everyone until about 1570. And that's just the maps. Atlases are particularly interesting and important because maps themselves have been around since about 600 BCE in Babylon. And no, it wasn't particularly accurate. But when you get to something like an atlas, you're looking to when they've really started making accurate world maps in the late 1500s with Ortelius and Mercator. My faves. There's more history there, but that's a brief overview, which is great if you're running a Renaissance era campaign in your D&D world, because it means that if you're roughly late Renaissance, you should get a fairly accurate map of the world. And if you want to bring it into your world and you want to plan later on that you can improvise around things, then you can deliberately add in some inconsistencies. I do. Later on in this series, when I create a world map first that I can give to my players, it's deliberately inaccurate based on the style of the early Renaissance and Jainism. And then later on, when I create a world map for my own reference, it's based on the Mercator maps of the late 1570s. But that being said, there is a precedent for creating a bundle of maps and having it available to people in a late Renaissance society, which is great for me. And yes, they were only really bundles of maps. They weren't guidebooks with descriptions of what the cultures and societies were like, where you could find certain things, what it was like when you entered into a town, like all the details that I'm going to be adding to the atlas. But we're going to take this one hurdle at a time. Now, the process that I'm using to create the atlas is going to be fairly long, and it's going to be fairly arduous. After all, I'm working on it over the course of a year. But what you're going to need to start off with is a reference map. One specific map of an overview of the area that you're working on. And that one, unlike what I was saying before about things being fairly accurate or deliberately producing inconsistencies in the world building so that you can confuse your players and add things in later on, this map has to be perfect. It is your reference point. Everything needs to be deliberately placed. All of the details have to be written by rote. All of the spelling has to be accurate and reproduced in every version of the text. Because if you have inconsistencies in your atlas later on, then it's practically worthless for world building. What you want in a reference book of your world is a consistent guide to the world in which every detail fits into place. And so that starts by having a reference map. So you need to create one, if you haven't got one, that has all of the details in it. So then I went through and I made 3 lists. The first is a list of the regions of the atlas, the general sections that you want to divide it into. In my case, I've got the duchies of the kingdom and their major natural landscapes. Things like mountain ranges, marshlands, forests, hillsides, the sort of stretches of the natural landscape that you can use as local guides to areas. That's the first one. The second one is towns and cities. Anyone who's using an atlas in world is going to need that. And then my third list is dungeons, ruins, and significant locations. We'll call them sites. And of course, as you go through, you're going to be adding naturally to all of these areas. I'll give you an idea of the level of detail that I'm going for. I have 8 duchies, 12 natural areas, 38 towns and cities, and 52 assorted sites. Which sounds both like a lot and also like not very much. It's a lot of work to create that, but it's only one small corner of the world. And I'm going to be working over the course of this year and redrawing those maps, adding new ones, making sure they're all in the same consistent style. That consistency in the atlas is very important, because if it's inconsistent, if its author is unreliable, then its value as a resource plummets. So the second step in this process is to ask yourself, what do you want to see in your atlas? I would recommend dividing it by large regions, like the duchies that I have. You're probably going to need towns and cities, and you're probably going to want to record all of the various dungeons that you go to. And in fact, it would be helpful to do, as I have done, first-hand accounts from the adventurers that have delved into those dungeons, and you add them to the atlas as they go in. If they go and do a dungeon delve, they come out of it, they write a brief little description, you can add it to the atlas. Hunky-dory. It looks great. I've also got other things as well, specific natural sites, the tower network that I worked on last year, the cities of the giants, and the ruins of the Yuan-Ti Empire, the Thessic Vrasa. So you make up that list and you stick to it. And then you just draw and draw and draw. For an atlas, you'll need dozens, if not hundreds of maps to fill it out. And that's a pretty large task. You'll want to go through and make sure that all of those styles are consistent. Again, the consistency of the map is very important. And the Red Quills can help you out if you want to decide on certain styles, or if you want to know what you need to add into your maps. We have specific tutorials on how to do town maps or kingdom maps, the things that you want to add in that people will want to reference. And my earlier videos have references to all of the different map details that you can include, culture or trade or war maps. So settle yourself in and get ready for a long haul project. You can start off, as I've done, with only a dozen or so locations, and if you write out the descriptions, which we'll get to in a second, you'll have a fairly good beginning. But as you go through, don't be afraid to keep adding to it and make it as easy on yourself as possible to do that. But remember to keep on top of it. Because the next step is to write the descriptions of it. The maps are one thing, but if you're creating an atlas and a guide to the various locations, as I'm doing, you're going to need to add the details that the reader will want to know about heading to a specific location. If your players want to learn more about the world and its lore and its world building by using the atlas as a resource, then they're going to want to know details about the things that you've mapped. For each map, you want to write somewhere between half a page and 2.5 pages, so that the people who read your atlas know what they can expect to encounter when they arrive at these locations. And that is a time-consuming part as well. If you follow that step by step, patiently, day after day, eventually you will create a compendium of your own. So if you want to bring this into your world, that's the way to do it. And there are ways that you can bring it into the campaign too, ways that you can engage your players and get them to contribute to the project as well. Because you've made your world lovingly over years of work. Your players have had their highs and their lows, saying goodbye to beloved NPCs and welcoming new ones over session after session. And the world feels real now, almost as real as our own, and you want to bring it even more to life. You can sit beside its peaceful rivers or feel the moonlight on your skin if you want to do something. You gather your players together and you tell them that this is what you want to work on. You want to create something that you can all have, something to tie you to this fictional place that's becoming something more real. They're still invested in the world, still eager to explore, and they all agree immediately, keen to help you to flesh it out. And so their characters welcome a new NPC, someone that they can tell their stories, relate their adventures to, bring back descriptions of these faraway or dangerous places. Each session, this mapmaker makes a new chart, a new page to add to a collected description of the place that you love. It starts slow, as all important work does, but it grows, and eventually they begin to bring their own suggestions to add to the growing tome. Songs they've written, illustrations of amazing views, folk stories of the myths and legends they've encountered. And together over months and years, page after page is added until together you've made it, an atlas of your world, a work lovingly rendered not just by you and your players, but by their characters and your NPCs. So that is what I'm doing. That is the project that I'm going to be working on this year. Not just me, not just myself, but my players are doing it as well. I'm doing it in my own world, so it's an immersive piece of world building. And you can do it in your own world too. Because a D&D world it's not just a game if you do it for long enough. It becomes a monument to this sense of realism, to this work that you've created. And an atlas is a big project. But it's worth it if you enjoy your world enough. and you want something to keep it with you. I've got an initial start on what I'm creating, and it's not as big as it's going to be. I've got a few dozen maps in there and some illustrations and a fair amount of world building. You can check it out. It's available for free on my Patreon if you want to use it as a resource to create your own, as a sort of rubric, or if you wanted to use it as a setting, you're very welcome to do so. And there are a lot of other maps that can be used with it, which I'll tie into the bundle. You can check it out in the description below. In the upcoming series, I'm going to be creating more maps of the world that end on inhabits, as well as the cosmos that surrounds it. I'm also really excited to announce that I'm now an affiliate of the Shop of Many Things, and that they've sent me some special ink pens to use in this upcoming series. I'm going to be using the elemental ink pens, which disappear when heat is applied and reappear when cold is applied, and the moonlight ink pens, which glow under UV. And you can see those in the upcoming videos. Now I'm going to start demonstrating how to use those pens next week in next week's video, but if you're keen to check them out earlier, the links are in the description below, and if you use them, you get the pens for free and you only pay for shipping. And also, because I'm an affiliate of the Shop of Many Things, if you decide to have a bit of a shop around, you'll not only be helping them out, you'll be helping me out here at the Red Quills to make more videos like this. So let me know how you're going with your own world maps. If you're interested in creating an atlas of your own, any thoughts on the project that you want to share, and you can do it in the comments below. But if you want to have a longer conversation about it, it's much easier to do that in the Discord. The Red Quills Discord is where I go to discuss map making, concepts behind world building, and much, much more. So you can check that out as well if you want a community to share your ideas with. Please like and comment and subscribe to help this video find more world builders, and I will see you next week so we can start creating those world maps that we were talking about. I'll see you next time. Happy adventuring.